Okay, let's unpack this. If you look at the global news flowing across the wire right now, you see, well, a stack of contradictions, really. We have these immediate life or death crises, some fueled by nature, some by, frankly, negligence, and they're running right alongside these long-term, highly complex geopolitical chess games. So we are taking a kind of global snapshot today. Our mission is to pull out the essential insights, the connections from these really disparate stories, everything from massive citizen protests over disasters to, silent high-tech military surveillance miles below the ocean surface.
And what's fascinating here is exactly that juxtaposition, isn't it? The world is simultaneously dealing with these immediate, really visceral humanitarian collapses where, institutional failure leads directly to loss of life at a local level, and at the same time pouring vast resources into high-stakes strategic maneuvering, stuff that dictates the future of international security. I think the theme that ties almost every source together today is accountability. Or maybe the lack of it, and where governments choose to invest their focus and their trust.
Let's start with the immediate visceral threat then. Once again, it involves water, but this time it's coming from the sky. We're tracking Hurricane Melissa as it barrels toward the Caribbean.
That's right. Melissa has already strengthened quite a bit. We're seeing 75-mile-per-hour winds now, and the U.S. National Hurricane Center is predicting rapid intensification. It's forecast to become a major hurricane, so winds well over 111 miles per hour, probably by tomorrow.
And the human cost. It's already mounting, isn't it? It just proves how lethal these systems are even before they hit peak strength. We've already seen, 3 deaths in Haiti and 1 in the Dominican Republic?
Correct. And beyond the fatalities, more than 500,000 people in the DR have had their crucial water supply disrupted. Initial reports also suggest nearly 200 homes already destroyed. It's hitting hard, even now.
And the main threat going forward isn't just the wind, right? It's the rain.
Exactly. It's the sheer volume of moisture being dumped. Forecasters expect this to lead to catastrophic flooding and landslides across the northern Caribbean, especially, in those mountainous areas. Even southeast Cuba is bracing for really heavy rainfall. They're talking up to 10, maybe 20 centimeters. That kind of rainfall turns steep slopes into disaster zones almost instantly.
Okay, so if we shift focus now, still talking about water, but moving from immediate natural danger to perhaps prolonged human negligence.
Yeah.
We land in Spain, specifically Valencia.
Yes, Valencia. Just 1 year after those devastating floods killed 229 people, which was, I believe, Europe's worst flood-related disaster in decades, since the 60s, actually.
And the anger there, it hasn't subsided one bit, has it?
Not at all. Tens of thousands of people protested in Valencia just this weekend. They're demanding accountability from the regional leader, Carlos Mazon. And the core criticism, looking at our sources, it's incredibly damning. It seems Mazon's administration issued an official alert more than 12 hours after the National Weather Agency had already issued its highest alert level, the red alert for torrential, potentially catastrophic rains.
12 hours late. And residents reported getting these official messages after the muddy water was already surrounding their cars, flooding homes.
Exactly. The delay was fatal, and people know it. That anger reflects this deep perception of betrayal, of failure. Protesters were chanting, "They didn't die, they were murdered." Strong words.
What's Mazon's defense in all this?
Well, his defense is that his administration supposedly lacked the necessary information and that the sheer magnitude of the rainfall was unforeseeable.
Wait, if the National Weather Service had already issued its highest red alert level 12 hours prior, how can the claim be it was unforeseeable? Doesn't that just fundamentally undermine it? The information existed, surely.
It certainly seems to, and that's precisely why a judicial investigation into the emergency response is currently underway. What this tragedy really highlights, I think, is what happens when climate disaster meets, well, political or administrative failure, especially when it comes to resource allocation. Prioritizing reactive messaging over proactive, timely warning systems. The result is this accountability crisis that leads directly, tragically, to civilian deaths.
So the takeaway from Valencia is stark. Institutional failure, delayed warnings, they cost hundreds of lives. But this whole idea of administrative failure, it isn't limited to huge disasters, is it? It can happen in a procedural breakdown of just basic security, like that really strange case of the fugitive from HMP Chelmsford in the UK.
Oh, right. This is almost a textbook example of a catastrophic administrative oversight, isn't it? A migrant sex offender, Kabatu, was mistakenly released from the prison. The system just broke down. Our sources point directly to the error being, and I quote, down to a series of mistakes, probably because staff are overworked and in short supply.
So one officer was suspended, but the root cause seems to be resource strain, systemic issues. And the detail that makes this whole thing so memorable, almost absurd, is that when the fugitive was sighted, he was still wearing his prison-issue gray tracksuit, but carrying his personal belongings in a very distinctive white bag decorated with pictures of avocados.
The avocado bag detail. As bizarre as it is, it really throws into sharp relief how low-level, how almost mundane some of these institutional breakdowns can be. But beneath the absurdity, the potential cause remains serious, doesn't it? Basic safety hinges on staffing levels, adequate training, and these are fundamentally budget and resource allocation choices made higher up.
Right. The failure here, though, it did prompt action. The Deputy Prime Minister ordered an independent investigation, and new procedures mandating additional checks the evening before any release are apparently due to start on Monday. An immediate, if maybe reactive, fix.
Now, let's take that theme of security and administrative failure and zoom out pretty dramatically to the deepening humanitarian crisis in Yemen. Here, the Iran-backed Houthi rebels are actively targeting the UN structure itself. This is a whole different level of failure and deliberate action.
Yeah, this moves from domestic oversight issues to the deliberate weaponization of aid, it seems. The Houthis have intensified their crackdown, detaining 2 additional female workers from the World Food Program just this Saturday, seizing them from their homes.
Yes, and the details surrounding their detention are profoundly disturbing. One of the women had reportedly been in critical condition after giving premature birth, and tragically, her baby died earlier this month, yet the detention continued regardless.
It's shocking. And the scale of this problem is huge now, right? How many UN staff are detained?
At least 55 UN staff members are currently detained by the Houthis. And the Houthis repeatedly allege, completely without providing any verifiable evidence, mind you, that these staffers are spies. The UN, of course, fiercely denies this.
And the result? Massive disruption of aid.
Severe disruption. The UN has been forced to suspend operations entirely in Sada province and even relocate its top humanitarian coordinator. It's just a brutal reminder that even global humanitarian efforts, these systems meant to provide basic support in crises, can be deliberately targeted as a political weapon.
Okay, moving from that kind of internal disruption to major high-visibility military posturing. Now, let's look at Venezuela versus the United States. This seems like a dramatic escalation in rhetoric.
It certainly is. President Nicolas Maduro is accusing the U.S., specifically mentioning the Trump administration, of fabricating a new eternal war. This comes as the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford approaches the country. And the Ford, well, it's one of the most significant strategic assets in the world. It can host up to 90 aircraft. It's a massive show of force.
And Maduro's strong language is also a reaction to political pressure from the U.S., isn't it?
Yeah.
Specifically targeting claims, which Trump made without evidence, that Maduro himself is the leader of this organized crime gang, Tren de Aragua.
Exactly. Maduro fiercely denies that claim. And just for context, Tren de Aragua is known primarily for things like extortion, killings, human smuggling across Latin America, not really major global drug trafficking, which is sometimes the implication. However, the context for the U.S. military presence and pressure is real. U.S. forces have been actively destroying boats off the Venezuelan coast, alleging drug trafficking. These operations have reportedly resulted in the deaths of at least 43 people, so it's an explicit military standoff rooted in counter-narcotics and, well, political deterrence.
Right. So contrast that very visible, very loud confrontation with what's happening hundreds of feet below the North Atlantic, where the confrontation is silent and high-tech.
Ah, yes. This is where we really see nations prioritizing these massive long-term strategic defense investments. Germany and the UK are jointly tracing Russian submarines in the North Atlantic. They're using the military plane, the Boeing P-8 Poseidon, which is essentially, believe it or not, a 737 passenger jet frame that's been heavily customized into a long-range maritime patrol and anti-submarine hunter.
Wow. So it's not just a surveillance plane. It's actually a strategic weapon platform, using highly sensitive radar and sonar to peer into the depths.
Precisely. And the key mechanism it uses is the deployment of sonobuoys. You can think of a sonobuoy as a kind of high-tech, disposable microphone that gets dropped into the ocean. These acoustic sensors then form a network, listening for the unique sound signature of an enemy submarine's engine, potentially from kilometers away. It's a very sophisticated, very high-stakes game of acoustics.
And the reason for all this intensive surveillance is critical, isn't it? NATO's worried?
Very much so. NATO officers have noted that movements of Russian submarines, and remember some of these are nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed, have increased significantly. They're calling them a strategic threat.
So it's a major collaborative effort.
Huge collaboration. NATO partners, Germany, the UK, Norway, the US, are all monitoring these movements from key bases across the region like Lossiemouth in Scotland, Keflavik in Iceland, Nordholz in Germany. They're investing heavily in this highly complex, very expensive defense system to address a sophisticated threat that may materialize later. Which contrasts pretty sharply, doesn't it, with the administrative cost-cutting perhaps linked to those basic failures back home we discussed. And these P-8 aircraft, they can even fire British-designed torpedoes if needed. That illustrates the seriousness of this strategic watch.
Okay, before we try and tie all this global movement together, we have to look quickly at a really significant political shift over in Ireland. Catherine Connolly was declared president after a landslide win, giving her what she calls a very clear mandate for change.
Yes, and this result is being described widely as a stunning victory, mostly because it represents a major challenge to Ireland's traditional political establishment, the parties that have dominated for decades, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
And the significance is amplified because Sinn Féin, the main opposition party, backed her campaign, right? Does this signal a sort of unified opposition to traditional politics? Maybe similar in spirit to that anti-establishment sentiment driving the protests in Valencia.
It definitely has that flavor. And crucially, Connolly immediately sought to establish herself as a united Ireland candidate. She stated very clearly she would actively seek a border poll, a referendum on Irish unity during her 7-year presidency. This isn't just a change in figurehead, it's potentially a seismic shift. It puts the question of the island's constitutional future front and center. Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill quickly dubbed it an era of hope.
Okay, so if we try and connect this all back to the bigger picture, the global snapshot we've taken today really reveals a world operating on those two very separate scales of time and maybe resource allocation that we started with.
Precisely. You see many of the domestic local crises, like the late flood warnings in Spain, and that resulting political accountability crisis, or maybe the resource-driven prison release error in the UK. They all seem to hinge on whether governments and institutions can successfully execute basic, necessary administrative functions. Protecting citizens. These are failures of fundamental operation, really.
While at the very same time, we see nations pouring enormous resources, huge amounts of money and expertise, into complex, high-level strategic defenses against potential future threats, whether that's tracing nuclear-powered Russian submarines with fleets of P-8 Poseidon aircraft or projecting military might via a U.S. aircraft carrier group steaming toward Venezuela.
So the crucial takeaway for you listening to this is maybe this. When resources are finite, which they always are, and when trust in institutions might be scarce, where does a state prioritize its investment? Does it prioritize robust early warning systems for floods and adequate staffing in prisons to prevent immediate, sometimes predictable loss of life? Or does it prioritize sophisticated surveillance and defense against those long-term potential geopolitical threats? That choice, that prioritization, really defines the security and safety of its citizens across the whole spectrum.
So what does this all mean then? You now have, hopefully, some insight into how these local institutional failures where, a delay of a few hours can cost hundreds of lives run completely parallel to the mounting long-term geopolitical tensions being managed by incredibly advanced surveillance tech and sheer military might.
Yeah. And maybe the final provocative thought for you to consider is this. In our current age, with both climate crisis accelerating and geopolitical instability seemingly rising, which set of failures do you believe ultimately poses the greater risk to global stability? Is it the systemic failure of internal administration, or is it the failure to deter or manage an external threat? Something to think about.